Dayreen got up. She was still having trouble breathing. What have I been thinking of? She began to realize that all her ideas about meeting her first alien creatures had involved her being known, even expected. Dayreen's here, finally, they were supposed to say. Now we can get something done. And then she and they would set out to save the universe together. Because of her own blindness, she'd gotten so excited that she'd jumped into a totally alien environment without orientation or preparation, and as a result, she'd nearly been run over in a parking lot. My own fault, she thought, disgusted with herself. It won't happen again. But in the meantime, people were still getting out of that car. These people, shorter and blockier than the first group, with more delicate legs and brighter colors. She picked up the computer, looked both ways most carefully up and down the road, and went after them. "You still working?" she said to the computer. "Syntax error 24. Sorry I asked. Just keep translating." As she came up behind the second group of people, Dayreen's throat tightened. Everything she could think of to say to aliens suddenly sounded silly. Finally, she wound up clearing her throat, which certainly needed it, as she walked behind them. Don't want to startle them, she thought. They did absolutely nothing. Maybe they can't hear it. Or maybe I said something awful in their language. Oh, no. Excuse me, she said. They kept walking along and said nothing. Look, Dayreen said, panting a little as she kept up with them. They were walking pretty fast. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm a stranger here. The computer translated what Dayreen said into a brief spasm of bleating, but the spidery people made no response. They came to the end of the line of racks and turned the corner. Ahead of them was what looked like a big building, made in the same way as the cars, an odd aggregate of cubes and other geometrical shapes stuck together with no apparent symmetry or plan. The scale of the thing was astonishing. Dayreen suddenly realized that the glowing green-white ceiling was in fact the sky, the lower layer of a thick, cloudy atmosphere, actually fluorescing under the light of a hidden, hyperactive sun. And her stomach did an unhappy flip as her sense of scale violently reoriented itself. I wanted strange, she thought, but not this strange. Look, she said to the person she was walking beside as they crossed another pathway toward the huge building. I'm sorry if I said something to offend you, but please, I need some help getting my bearings. Dayreen was so preoccupied that she bumped right into something on the other side of the street and then yipped in terror. Towering over her was one of the first things to get out of the car, a creature 7 feet high at least and 4 feet wide, a great pile of glittering, waving, metallic claws and tentacles, with an odd smell. Dayreen backed away fast and started stammering apologies. The tall creature bleated at her, a shocking sound up so close. "Excuse me," said the computer, translating the bleat into a dry and cultured voice like a BBC announcer's. "But why are you talking to our luggage?" "Oh, said Dayreen, and shut her mouth. There they were, her first words to a member of another intelligent species. Blushing and furious, she finally managed to say, "I thought they were people." "Why?" said the alien. "Well, they were walking." "It'd be pretty poor luggage that didn't do that much, at least," said the alien, eyeing the baggage as it spidered by. "Good luggage levitates, and the new models pack and unpack themselves. You must have come here from a fair way out." "Yeah," she said. "My gait is about to become patent," the alien said. "Come along, I'll show you the way to the departures hall. Or are you meeting someone?" They started to walk. Dayreen began to relax a little. This was more like it. "No," she said, "I'm just traveling. But please, what planet is this?" "Earth," said the alien. Dayreen was surprised for a second, and then remembered having read somewhere that almost every sentient species calls its own planet Earth, or the world, or something similar. "I mean, what do other people call it?" "All kinds of things, as usual. Silly names, some of them. There'll be a master list in the terminal. You can check that." "Thanks," Dairine said, and then was shocked and horrified to see a large triangular piece of the terminal fall off the main mass of the building, except that it didn't fall more than a short distance, and then it regained its height and soared away, a gracefully tumbling pyramid. "Does it do that often?" she said when she could breathe again. "Once every few beats," said the alien. "It's the physical transport shuttle. Are you on holiday? Mind the slide now." "Yes," Dairine started to say, until the alien stepped onto a stationary piece of pavement in front of them and instantly began slipping away from her toward the bizarre mass of the terminal building at high speed. The surprise was too sudden to react to. Her foot hit the same piece of paving and slipped from under her as if she had stepped on ice. Dairine threw her arms out to break her fall, except that there wasn't one. She was proceeding straight forward, too, tilted somewhat backward, at about 50 miles an hour. Her heart hammered. It hammered worse when something touched her from behind. She whipped around, or tried to. It was only the alien's luggage, reaching out to tilt her forward so she stood straight. "What is this?" she said. "Slide field," the alien said, proceeding next to her without moving at the same quick pace. "Inertia-abeyant, selectively frictionless environment. Here we go. Which gating facility are you making for?" It was all happening too fast. The terminal building swept forward, swift as a leaping beast, rearing up 1,000 stories high, miles across, blotting out the sky. The slide field poured itself at what looked like a blank, silvery wall 100 feet sheer. Dairine threw her arms up to protect herself and succeeded only in bashing her face with the computer. The wall burst like a thin, flat cloud against her face. Harmless. And they were through. "The crossings," said the alien. "What do you think?" She could not have told him in an hour's talking. The Crossings Hypergate facility on Rearhoth B is renowned among the billion homeworlds for its elegant, classical, Lylene architecture and noble proportions. But Dairine's only cogent thought for several minutes was that she had never imagined being in an airline terminal the size of New Jersey. The ceiling, or ceilings, for there were thousands of them, layered, interpenetrating, solid and lacy, in steel and glass, in 100 materials and 100 colors, all towered up into a distance where clouds, real clouds, gathered. About a quarter-mile off to one side, it appeared to be raining. Through the high, greenish air, under the softened light of the fluorescing sky that filtered in through the 1,000 roofs, small objects that might have been machines droned along, towing parcels and containers behind them. Beneath, scattered all about on the terminal floor, were stalls, platforms, counters, racks, built in shapes Dairine couldn't understand, and with long, tall signs placed beside them that Dairine couldn't begin to read. And among the stalls and kiosks, the whole vast white floor was full of people, clawed, furred, shelled, or armored, upright or crawling, avian, insectile, mammalian, lizard-like, vegetable, mingling with forms that could not be described in any earthly terms. There were very few hominids, none strictly human, and their voices were lost in the rustling, wailing, warbling, space-softened cacophony of the terminal floor. People hopped and stepped and leaped and walked and crawled and oozed and slid and tentacled and went in every imaginable way about their uncounted businesses, followed by friends and families and fellow travelers, by luggage floating or walking, all purposeful, certain, every one of them having somewhere to go and going there. Every one of them except Dairine, who was beginning to wish she had not come. "There," said the alien, and Dairine was glad of that slight warning because the slide field simply stopped working and left her standing still. She waved her arms, overcompensating, and her stomach did a frightened wrench and tried once or twice, for old time's sake, to get rid of food that was now on Ananke. "Here you are," said the alien, gesturing with its various tentacles. "Arrivals over there, departures over that way. Stasis and preservation down there. Over there. The computer made a staticky noise that suggested it was unable to translate something. And, of course, waste disposal. You enjoy your trip now? I have to catch up with my fathers. Have a nice death. But, Dairine said. Too late. The broad, armored shape had taken a few steps into a small crowd, stepped on a spot on the floor that looked exactly like every other, and vanished. Dairine stood quite still for a few minutes. She had no desire to hit one of those squares by accident. I'm a spud, she thought. A complete imbecile. Look at this. Stuck in an airport, something like an airport, with no money, no ID that these people will recognize, no way to explain how I got here or how I'm going to get out, no way to understand half of what's going on, scared to death to move, and pretty soon some security guard or cop or something is going to see me standing here and come over to find out what's wrong, and they're going to haul me off somewhere and lock me up. The thought was enough to hurriedly start her walking again. She glanced around to try to make sense of things. There were lots of signs posted all over, or rather, in most cases, hanging nonchalantly in mid-air, but she could read none of them. While she was looking at one written in letters that at a distance seemed like Roman characters, something bumped into Dairine fairly hard about shin height. She staggered and caught herself, thinking she had tripped over someone's luggage. But there was nothing in her path at all. She paused, confused, and then tried experimentally to keep walking. The empty air resisted her. And then, behind her, someone said, "Your pardon," and slipped right past her, something that looked more or less like a holly tree, but it was walking on what might have been stumpy roots, and the berries were eyes, all of which looked at Dairine as the creature passed. She gulped. The creature paid her no mind, simply walked through the bit of air that had been resisting Dairine, and vanished, as the thing with the tentacles had earlier. Just as it blinked out of existence, air whiffing past Dairine into the place where it had been, she thought she caught sight of what looked like a little triangular piece of shiny plastic or metal held in one of the thing's leaves. A ticket, Dairine thought, and a little more wandering and watching showed her that this was the case. Wherever these little gates might lead, none of them would let you step on it unless you had the right ticket for it. Probably the bit of plastic was a computer chip, programmed with the fact that you had paid your fare. So there was no need to fear that she might suddenly fall unshielded into some environment where they were breathing methane or swimming around in lava. Dairine began to wander again, feeling somewhat better. I can always sit down in a corner somewhere and program another jump, she thought. Be smart to do that now, though, in case something starts to happen and I want to get out quick. She looked for a place to sit. Off to one side was a big collection of racks and benches where various creatures were hung up or lying on the floor. On a hunch, she said to the computer, "Is it safe to sit over there?" "Affirmative," said the computer. Dairine ambled over in the direction of the racks and started searching for something decent to sit in. The creatures she passed ignored her. Dairine found it difficult to return the compliment. One of the racks had what looked like a giant blue vampire bat hanging in it. Or no, it had no fur. The thing was actually more like a pterodactyl, and astonishingly pretty. The blue was iridescent, like a hummingbird's feathers. Dairine walked around it, fascinated, for quite a long time, pretending to look for a chair. But there seemed to be no chairs in this particular area. The closest to a chair-like thing was a large, low bowl that was full of what seemed to be purple jello, except that the jello put up a long, blunt limb of itself, the end of which swiveled to follow as Dairine passed. She hurried by. The effect was rather like being looked at by a submarine periscope, and the jello thing had about as much expression. Probably wonders what the heck I am, she thought. Boy, is it mutual. Finally, she settled for the floor. She brought up the utilities menu and started running down the list of planets again, then stopped and asked for the help utility. "Nature of query?" said the computer.